If you go outside and walk along the seafront, it won't be long before you get to a petrol station that's got no fuel. Level up, you can't even fill up. And conference, doesn't that just tell you everything you need to know about this government? Ignoring the problem, blaming someone else, then coming up with a half-baked solution. Why do we suddenly have a shortage of HGV drivers? Why is there no plan in place? A tank of fuel already costs £10 more than it did at the start of the year. Gas and electricity bills up. Gaps in the supermarket shelf.
Imagine winning a landslide election with a massive parliamentary majority, becoming Prime Minister with seemingly unlimited political capital and the entire country ready to give you a chance, and then within 18 months having 1 in 3 of your own voters saying you should resign and be replaced. That is the absolutely catastrophic situation facing Keir Starmer right now, according to devastating new polling from JL Partners that shows 38% of people who supported Labour in 2024 believe the party would do better among voters with a new leader, compared to just 13% who think it would do worse. Starmer has also been ranked as the worst Labour Prime Minister in history, which is quite an achievement considering the competition includes people who lost elections and presided over economic crises. The polling asked Labour voters who should replace the current Prime Minister, and the favourite choice was Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham on 19%, followed by Angela Rayner on 10% and Lucy Powell on 9%. These are not fringe figures or media speculation. These are Labour's own voters actively discussing who should take over because they concluded Starmer is not up to the job. This is not just bad polling. This is existential crisis territory where the Prime Minister's own supporters have lost faith barely a year into his premiership. Quick favour. If you are absolutely stunned by this collapse in support where a third of Labour voters want their own Prime Minister gone, hit that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you watching have not subscribed yet. It is completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you these incredible moments where political careers implode in real time. Cheers if you did. Now back to Starmer's spectacular unraveling. Let us start with that headline figure because it is genuinely shocking and historically unprecedented. 38% of people who voted Labour in 2024 now think the party would do better with a different leader. These are not Conservative voters who never liked Starmer in the first place, not Reform supporters who were always going to be hostile, but Labour's own voters, the people who put Starmer into Downing Street, who have looked at his performance over the last year and a half and concluded he needs to go. The fact that this sentiment exists among more than a third of Labour voters is politically catastrophic because it suggests deep dissatisfaction that goes beyond normal midterm grumbling or disappointment with specific policies. These people have fundamentally lost confidence in Starmer's ability to lead. The comparison figure of just 13% who think Labour would do worse with a new leader makes the situation even more dire. If opinion was evenly split, you could argue that Starmer retained significant support among the base and that replacing him would be risky. But when 3 times as many Labour voters think replacing him would improve things compared to those who think it would make things worse, the mathematics of his political survival become extremely challenging. Political leaders can weather bad polls and even internal discontent if they retain core support among their own voters. But when your own base wants you gone, you are in genuine trouble. The ranking of Starmer as the worst Labour Prime Minister in history is particularly brutal because Labour has had some genuinely unsuccessful Prime Ministers who lost elections or were forced out after short tenures. Starmer is being rated below all of them, which tells you just how disappointed and angry Labour voters are with his performance. He won a landslide election. He has a huge parliamentary majority. He had every advantage a Prime Minister could ask for, and yet he is being judged as worse than predecessors who had far more difficult circumstances. That is a damning assessment of his leadership, his policy choices, and his political judgment. The question of who should replace Starmer is where things get really interesting because it reveals what Labour voters think is missing from the current leadership. Andy Burnham topping the list at 19% makes perfect sense because he has successfully built a political brand as Greater Manchester Mayor that is distinct from Westminster Labour. He is seen as more authentic, more connected to working-class communities, and better at communicating Labour values without the technocratic management speak that characterizes Starmer's approach. Burnham has name recognition, political experience, and a track record of winning elections in a major English region. The fact that nearly 1 in 5 Labour voters would prefer him to Starmer tells you that they are looking for someone with more personality, clearer values, and better political instincts. Angela Rayner in second place on 10% makes sense, as she represents the more traditional Labour left and has maintained popularity among party members even as the leadership has moved rightward. Rayner has authenticity and working-class credentials that Starmer lacks, and she connects emotionally with voters in a way that Starmer struggles to do. Lucy Powell, who succeeded Rayner as deputy Labour leader, polling at 9% suggests that Labour voters are looking at the current leadership team and thinking that people other than Starmer might do a better job as a figurehead. Wes Streeting and Ed Miliband both tying on 6% is fascinating because they represent very different tendencies within Labour. Streeting is a modernizer who is willing to challenge NHS orthodoxies and talk about difficult reforms, while Miliband is a former leader who has reinvented himself as a climate policy specialist. The fact that both poll equally suggests Labour voters are divided about whether they want someone more radical or someone more centrist, but they agree that Starmer is not providing what they need. The bottom of the list, with Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood on 4%, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson on 3%, and Chief Secretary Darren Jones on 2%, shows that most of Starmer's cabinet are not seen as credible alternatives, which is both a problem and an opportunity for those at the top of the list. The regional breakdown is particularly damning, with Labour voters in the Northwest most convinced the party would benefit by ditching Starmer, with 14% saying Labour would do much better if it replaced him. The Northwest includes Greater Manchester, Liverpool, and other traditional Labour strongholds that should be the party's safest territory. If Labour is losing confidence in these areas, it suggests the party's problems are not just in marginal seats or areas where they recently gained support, but in their core heartlands where loyalty has historically been strongest. A survey taken earlier this month by Opinion found Starmer's net approval rating stood at -43%, the lowest of all the major party leaders. Let that number sink in for a moment. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the leader of the governing party with a massive majority, has a net approval rating of -43. That is not just unpopular, that is genuinely hated by a significant portion of the electorate. While no leader achieved a net positive score, which tells you something about the general state of British politics and public confidence in politicians, the fact that Starmer is doing worse than everyone else is politically toxic. The most popular leader according to this polling was Green Party leader Zach Polanski, who had a score of -1%, just ahead of Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey at -4%. The fact that the Green Party leader, who most people probably cannot name and who has no realistic prospect of becoming Prime Minister, is 42 points more popular than Starmer tells you everything about how badly the Prime Minister is performing. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch polled at -10%, which is also terrible but significantly better than Starmer. Even Nigel Farage, one of the most divisive figures in British politics who generates strong reactions both positive and negative, polls at -12%, which is still 31 points better than Starmer. James Crouch from Opinion had a particularly cutting analysis. Zach Polanski looks set to become a painful thorn in Keir Starmer's side in 2026 unless the PM can set a clearer direction of travel for his government. Until then, Labour voters will continue to be drawn to a Green Party they feel offers a stronger sense of purpose and conviction than their own. That phrase, stronger sense of purpose and conviction, is absolutely devastating because it goes to the heart of Starmer's problem. He does not seem to stand for anything clear or compelling. He is not offering a vision that inspires people or makes them excited about the future. He is managing decline and making technocratic adjustments while voters desperately want someone who believes in something and can articulate why it matters. The only breathing space Starmer has, according Crouch, is that few expect the Greens to be ready to take the reins of power anytime soon. In other words, Starmer's main advantage is not that people think he is doing a good job, but that they do not think his critics are ready to govern either. That is not a strong foundation for political survival. You are essentially saying the only reason I am still here is because the alternatives are also seen as not quite ready, which is damning with faint praise at best. The economic polling is equally catastrophic, with 71% saying they think the economy has got worse over the last 12 months. Only 7% said things had improved. That is a crushing assessment of the government's economic management. When more than 7 in 10 people think the economy has deteriorated on your watch, you cannot credibly claim to be delivering economic success or growth or any of the other promises Labour made during the election campaign. Just 15% think their personal financial situation will improve over the next year, while 40% believe it will get worse and 39% expect it to stay about the same. That means 85% of people either think things will get worse or stay the same, with only 15% optimistic about improvement. Those are apocalyptic numbers for a government. The slight improvement from a month ago, when 56% said they expected their financial situation to get worse and 75% said Labour was managing the economy badly, might provide some cold comfort to Starmer's team. Things are getting slightly less terrible, which is progress of sorts, but when 4 in 10 people still expect their finances to worsen and 7 in 10 think the economy has deteriorated, you are still in crisis territory. This is not a government that has turned the corner. This is a government that has maybe stopped actively getting worse at quite the same rate, but is still deeply unpopular and seen as failing. Tyrone Sermon from Find Out Now warned of a potential Labour meltdown at the next general election as Reform continues to hold a steady lead. His analysis is worth quoting at length because it captures just how unprecedented this situation is. I think my main takeaway is that maybe because there are so many polls or because we are used to bad news, we have almost become accustomed to seeing the governing party, who won an enormous majority last year, in 4th place. But no, this is deeply, deeply unusual, and I just do not think it is quite sunk in yet. He is absolutely right that we have become somewhat numb to polling showing Labour in 4th place behind Reform, the Conservatives, and sometimes even the Greens, but we should not lose sight of how extraordinary that is.